Right, hello and welcome to your 7th lesson at the Learning Center, and good evening to you too, Asaf, or good morning should I say.
Good evening, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Hello everyone, hello Mutlu.
Thank you.
We're delighted.
Now,
what are we going to have today?
Today is going to be one of our very interesting lessons. Actually, it's again, all the lessons in the Learning Center in the fundamental course is actually, as the name is, very fundamental. And today we're going to have the first of 2 lessons regarding the topic of freedom and the freedom of will. So it's a very, very important topic because as some of you might know, that it's a very complicated issue. Where do we have freedom of choice, freedom of will, and how to choose things that we're really independent. So we're going to go into our nature a little bit more, and we're going to go into the general nature of our lives and see where we're really at with that. And as usual, please drop us a line and say hello if you're with us, and also any questions that you might have, drop them in the chat box, and what we'll do is we'll do our best. Okay, so there we go.
So maybe another word that's worthwhile saying about this lesson is that, as Mutlu said, it's a 2-part lesson. There's a reason why it's a 2-part lesson, and there's a reason why it comes towards the end of the course, because free choice, it is kind of a rich topic, a little bit intricate topic, which is why it requires sort of the basis of, and everything that we studied so far in the course, and sort of kind of like it converges into this topic of free choice, because it has to do with the nature of the creator, the nature of the created being, the purpose and the process and purpose of creation, and somewhat, to some extent, perception of reality. And you'll see how stuff that we talked about, the evolution of desires, you'll see how all of these things relate to what we're going to study today. The article also is phenomenal. It's
mind-blowing.
It really is, and I think that any Kabbalah student, anyone who engages with the authentic Kabbalah text, the first time you encounter this text is a great experience, and so
great revelation.
Yeah, so we're seeing some friends already connected and sending some greetings. So it's great to see you here and ready for the lesson. We're ready too. Let's go.
Okay, great. You know what? Let's as you know, Dr. Michael Lightman is our teacher here at Bnei Baruch, and why don't we start with a nice little heartwarming clip with the Rav, and then we'll get going. Before we start the clip, though,
treat.
Just make sure if you got this book in your house, just have it handy. We'll be reading from it. If not, please open up the PDF if you downloaded it from last week, or if you have it, we'll be reading from page 375.
Yeah,
now,
moderators, please send the link for this specific, for the excerpts from this lesson, or the entire article, whatever you have there, you should have. So please just post the link now so all the students can download it. And let's watch a video.
Let's watch a clip from Michael Lightman, Dr. Michael Lightman.
In order to allow us find our free choice, our independence, we were given the wisdom of Kabbalah. The wisdom of Kabbalah is a means that each and every person, each and every soul can use to reveal its ability to gain independence to the extent of its root. You attain your independence according to your root, to how much you need to be independent, and I to my own extent. And the same with all the other souls. The Creator created a will to receive, not just with the purpose of making it like Himself. So He would have done it to begin with. His problem is that out of this entire development, there will be something that can be called independent. This is why there is such a great evolution from above downwards, and then such a development that happens in our world, and only now we reach the spiritual development. Why? Because now you have some egoistic machine that can face the world, which is, let's say, an altruistic machine, and out of the difference between these two machines, we will be able to somehow extract, create an independent point. It's not about advancing in an easier way or a more pleasant way. It is only for us to draw out this aspect of independence, that I am independent and I exist.
There we go. That last sentence and the first sentence actually are very, very influential. If you think about it, if you don't study the wisdom of Kabbalah, it's like you don't have an independence. And the whole idea of studying the wisdom of Kabbalah is that to get independent. So what's this whole issue? Let's take a look. Well, from the previous lessons that we studied, as you already know, that we are a desire to receive pleasure. And this is exactly the form that our nature works in. So we're always making a calculation as how we can get maximum pleasure with minimum effort. And because our nature, our human nature, is a desire to receive pleasure for the self, this is how everything inside of us, all our cells actually are working and striving towards just that. Our whole being is about how we can get more pleasure by exerting minimum effort. Now, pleasure might be different from person to person. Some people get pleasure by making other people happy, okay? But that's also getting pleasure. So sometimes I get questions in the Learning Center. We all get questions when we're teaching, but I like making people happy. Some people say, I like to give to people. That's also great, but we're also doing that because it makes us happy, okay? We get pleasure from that as well. So regardless of what you do, okay, you might be the biggest donator on the planet to all the charities on the planet. We do everything we do in order to get self-fulfillment, and that's our nature. And the program works in that way. Our whole being works in that way. And we learned also from the previous lessons that, well, the nature of the Creator is to bestow. And he is in full bestowal, like complete opposite to what we are. But then we also found out through our study that the purpose of creation was to receive anyway. So there's no conflict there. The purpose of creation was that the Creator wants to give the created being everything. Okay? In fact, this is also what the Rav touched upon. The Creator could have created us in bestowal just like that anyway, instead of creating us as a desire to receive just like that anyway. So what's the difference? What's the whole point here? Well, the whole point is, through these extreme opposites of our nature being a complete desire to receive for ourselves, and the Creator's nature of being complete desire to bestow without the self at all, we begin to build ourself. And the only way to build ourself is independently. So we're going to do a bit of a reading first, so that Baruch Sulam, through his article, gives us a bit of a direction. If you have the book, it's on page 375. So let's open page 375.
Yeah, and I'm also seeing all the links are also on the chat box, so
Great.
you can find it from there too.
Wonderful. 375, the freedom, and we're going to read where it says, under the subtitle, Freedom of Will, second paragraph. In fact, I'm going to read from the excerpt I have here, because it's in bold and slightly more comfy on my eyes. Now, let's start reading. It is a general view that freedom is deemed a natural law, which applies to all of life. Thus we see that animals that fall into captivity die when we rob them of their freedom. This is a true testimony that providence does not accept the enslavement of any creature. It is with good reason that humanity has been struggling for the past several hundred years to obtain a certain measure of freedom of the individual. Yet, this concept expressed in that word freedom remains unclear. And if we delve into the meaning of that word, there will be almost nothing left. For before you seek the freedom of the individual, you must assume that any individual in and of itself has the quality called freedom, meaning that one can act according to one's own free choice. All right? So normally when we talk about freedom of will here in this world, all right, we're talking about, choosing from the things that we want to have. So the Kabbalist is saying, well, that's all, good and great, but if our nature is already a desire to receive, and it wants to get maximum pleasure with minimum effort, and I'm calculating always with that program, well, that's not really freedom of choice, they're saying. Because when we think about freedom of choice, if you ask any person on the street, maybe even if you ask yourself, you can say, well, wait a minute, I have freedom of choice. I go to a restaurant, I look at the menu, and I choose whatever I want. Or I look at the world, I look at all the things that I can do, and I choose whatever I want to do. I look at the I look at the movies, what's on the movie list today, I don't know, Netflix or whatever, and I choose whatever I want to watch. I got freedom of choice. I can do whatever I want. That's what people will tend to say. And they're right in their own way. However, if we understand that our nature is always going to seek where there's more pleasure, I'm always going to choose from that many what I believe will give me maximum pleasure.
And you know what? Even to deepen the question, who gave me the choices that I'm selecting from to begin with?
Exactly, which we're going to touch on in a minute as well.
And also, another point to take into account is, what do you make your decision based on? Okay, so you want pleasure, but also any point in life, you make your judgments and decisions based on what? On everything you know and feel in that moment. So what determines everything you know and feel in that moment?
Exactly.
Right? There's a bunch of things that do that. Your life experience, what you've been told, what your wife told you to get at the supermarket. So that kind of limits your free choice.
Well, if you have a wife, you have no free choice. Just kidding. Okay, just kidding. But you might say, before we touch on that, actually, you might ask yourself, well, why do I need freedom of choice anyway? I mean, I can just, live the life that I'm living right now, choose from the options that I have, do my best and forget the rest. That's what society generally is doing, isn't it? That's all well and great. And if we didn't have a point in the heart, we'd be happy to live like that. And before the point in the heart awakens, we're actually living like that, and we don't mind living like that. For us, it's like, well, this is life, I'm making decisions, and I'm moving forward, and I'm trying to, attain the things that I want. And that's how people are living, and that's fine and fair, and that's how naturally it should be. However, if we have a dot in the heart and we're asking that question, well, what's the meaning of my life? Well, the meaning of your life is exactly here, making the right choice, which is called the freedom of choice. And this is exactly what Dr. Michael Lightman touched upon in his first sentence. If you don't have that, you're not a creature. You're not even starting to be a creature. There's no you. You're not even existing in terms of a reality. Because let's face it, because our lives are transient, and as we live, if you think about everything you lived today, it's like a dream. Everything you lived yesterday is like a distant memory. Everything you lived a few years ago is like, wow, was that me that lived and went through that? So our life is very transient. It's not really something that's tangible with respect to the previous second. So, and because it doesn't really make us feel like an independent existing being, this point of choice is very, very important for anyone who's studying the meaning of life, because there is only one place you can exert effort, which Asaf gently touched on, and which we're going to touch on in a minute. But before we do that, let's read a little bit more, if you don't mind. The reason I like to read a bit more is that because, not just because we have to, but it's also a good way of getting into this Kabbalistic material. And as you know, when we study the sources, when we study from those who attained spirituality and want to convey that to us, we attract that special attainment that they already have as well. So it's good to touch on the sources, and we'd like to read a bit more. We'll continue to read from page 376. And on page 376, there's a sentence that starts with when. Okay. When we examine. Okay, there we go. It's up on the screen as well. When we examine the acts of an individual, we shall find them compulsory. He is compelled to do them and has no freedom of choice. In a sense, he is like a stew cooking on a stove. It has no choice but to cook. But it must cook because Providence has harnessed life with two chains, pleasure and pain. So there we go. Our nature being pleasure and pain, that's how we're going in life, actually. We're always choosing things that we believe are going to give us more pleasure, and we're always running away from things which we believe might cause us, pain, okay, or irritation, let's say. It doesn't have to be like pain, something great, but even irritating things we stay away from. And because our nature works in this way, Kabbalists are saying, well, what choice do you have? You're on autopilot. Your nature is on autopilot. Everybody's nature is on autopilot. And we know that the generality of nature is also on autopilot. We've got the sun going up and down every day, routine. The seasons are going all routine. The planets and the stars and the suns and the moon, they're all moving in routine. So everything is on autopilot. So, well, who are we, and what are we doing anyway?
Yeah, and you didn't even choose where to be born, to whom to be born.
Nothing.
Your parents, your education, the environment you grew up in, whether to be tall or short or blue-eyed or black, brown eyes, all that stuff, mentality, background, nationality. We didn't choose any of that. And these things have a critical effect, at least on our starting point, right? Socioeconomic background.
Everything.
All that stuff that we started with is laid on us, given to us, and now it's go. It's in a sense, and everything is going in these cycles around us. The sun will go up in the morning, the moon will go up at night, and a lot of other things are repeating themselves in a cycle. And so in a sense, it's like those, how do you call those dolls that you
a wind-up doll.
Yeah, exactly. These ones. In a sense, from the beginning of your life, it's someone wound you up, and then it's
let you go.
Let you go.
Stuck, and we're going around.
So we're
Pretty
looking for where is that, space of freedom within this whole deal.
Exactly. A very, very subtle point indeed. Nicely touched by Asaf. So we have no choice about where we were born, whose child we were going to be, how we're going to be educated. In fact, even if we could choose all of that, all our genes, chromosomes are from an ancestral heritage that dates back to the beginning of creation, because we're all getting those from the previous ancestors, right? So that's why in the world, you can't even say there is a race anymore, because we're so mixed up. We're just one human race. And yeah.
And not a lot of people are aware of that.
Yeah.
What Mutlu just said, but it's actually a scientific fact today. There is at least every person has, on average, between 4 to 6 different origins that could be from in their DNA, that could be from around the world. There is no such thing as pure this or pure that.
Absolutely.
It's
we're all a good mix.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And which brings to mind all sorts of questions about our ideas of nationality and
race.
Origin, race. Yeah, it's DNA tests today just show that when you go back, the farther you go back, you see that we're kind of all cousins in a way.
Absolutely. In fact, beyond cousins, one in every 5 person is connected to several people. So throughout the generations, if you think about it, we're all kind of, expanding and growing in population through connection with other people. And if you go to many Western countries, many countries around the world today, you'll have a lot of people who are married from different backgrounds and they have children and so forth. So we're all mixed. So within this whole, flow of creation and life, we don't get to choose where we're born. So we could have been born anywhere from Sydney to Timbuktu, or from, from Mississippi to Hong Kong, all right? And we don't decide on those things. And all of a sudden, though, just like he's telling us here, that we just, we're born and we just start cooking like stew on a stove. So the reason he's mentioning that is because, and Asaf touched on it nicely, is when we're born, as most of science is also, social science is also telling us, that we are born under the influence of wherever we're born, right? Let's say, who do we have today here, for example?
I see, for instance, Norm from Salt Lake Tahoe.
Okay, so he's from
California, I believe.
Okay.
And Stacy from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and Linda from Arizona, USA. And we've got more people. But
okay, great. So let's say we
you want to pick one?
No, we got friends from the USA. Let's take the USA, for example, because we have friends from the USA. Okay,
Right.
so I'm from the USA, and I was, let's say, born there, somewhere there. I don't know, Denver, New York, doesn't matter where, California. So I'm born in a family.
It's Aussie. It's close to Alaska.
Okay, okay. That's not so bad. It's not so bad. Nothing's bad, by the way, okay? So I'm born in a family, okay, which we didn't choose. I didn't choose. And let me just, in brackets, just mention, there are some methods out there, spiritual methods, that say, before we were born, we chose what to be, who to be, where to be, and so on. In Kabbalah, there is no such choice. And if you look at your life, and if you could choose, you would have made a much better decision, okay? So there's no such choice. If we all look at our lives right now, trust me.
The proof is simple. There's just so many things that you're not happy with about your life, about your circumstance, about your conditions, about your opening, the opening shot with which you start your life. And, if you could choose that and just change this and this and that about your life, then why haven't you done so to begin with?
Exactly. All right. So for one thing, you would not have been in Kabbalah because you wouldn't have been asking what the hell is the point of my life. Okay. So let's just start. Let's say we're born in a country and we're born to parents which we didn't choose. And all of a sudden, in whichever country we're born in, we're influenced by everything. Okay. So I have parents. I have friends. So I'll say parents and family because, our grandparents, our cousins, they're all part of that. Friends. I have school. So all my education. And we have, of course, TV, media. Okay, let's call it media because now the internet is a big deal. It influences very much. And from everything I see in life, I get impressions in my desire to receive, in me basically, about what makes me happy or what makes me sad. Okay, so we're in between these two sensations throughout our lives where we're getting input from the environment. So the environment is influencing me constantly and I'm going through emotions which either make me feel good or bad. Similar to an animal as well. Okay, let's say a chicken is born in a chicken farm. He's with the other chickens or chicks or whatever. They eat, they drink, they live their life. Let's say they're in a good farm. Okay, so and they're roaming around in the farm, around the farm, and they get fed, and they have their life as well. Okay, and there's somebody that's feeding them and growing them, and so on. Same with us. In life, we're growing, we're learning, we're understanding what our life is, and so on. And the chicken is in the same way. Just like we walk on two legs, okay, and we have our life, a chicken walks on two legs, and it has its life as well. And, well, the chicken obviously gets eaten, but, if you think about it, we get eaten up by life as well. So our life isn't much different, because at the end of the day, the chicken is cooked, and at the end of the day, life is pretty much cooking us as well. And as we get all older, what tends to happen as we get older is that life becomes more demanding from us. As we grow up, our parents seem to load more responsibility on us. They're not always smiling at us like we were when we were babies. Sometimes we're getting told off and we don't know what's going on. So as we grow up, life becomes more demanding, more pressuring. Same with the chicken as well. You know, we love little baby chickens, but as they grow up, we don't really have a lot of love for them. They're not as cute as they used to be. So life has the same kind of format, let's say, for an animal and for a human. So what really is a difference? Because humans and animals, we're all desired to receive. They also like pleasure. They also stay away from danger, you know, instinctively. And we, according to the knowledge that we have and the instincts and the experience we have, we also strive for pleasure and stay away from pain. What the difference is between both of us cooking, the chicken cooking, and us in life cooking, is that there are certain things that we can do and which are inside of us and animals don't have. And those two things I'll just touch on, and then I will let you add, can I? One is we have a growing ego. Okay, our desire to receive is constantly growing and growing and growing. In animals, it's fixed. They want certain things and they carry on. But as humans, as we grow up, our egoism is growing. And the second most important thing that animals don't have in the perception of reality is that we have a concept of time. We can plan and anticipate for the future. We can work and accept suffering now in order for an anticipated pleasure in the future. And this concept is very important because at this point you begin to calculate and you begin to, based on that calculation, start to make decisions that will kind of guide you or kind of like push you to a goal. And this distinction between an animal and a human is a fundamental difference. And when we integrate this point of freedom of choice to our anticipated future, then we can at every point start to make independent, free decisions, free from our nature, free from our desire to receive. Sorry, Asaf, you were going to say something there.
Just that Baruch also explains this so beautifully, that I really recommend just reading the next excerpt. That starts from the living creatures.
The living creatures, sure. Let's read that too.
That just let Mutlu's last words kind of echo in you as you go into this text, and let's see really how Baruch also explains exactly that. So
we're starting to read on, we'll continue to read on page 376, starting with the living creatures. So the living creatures have no freedom of choice to choose pain or reject pleasure. And man's advantage over animals is that he can aim at a remote goal, meaning to agree to a certain amount of current pain out of choice of future benefit or pleasure to be attained after some time. But in fact, there is more than a seemingly commercial calculation here, where the future benefit or pleasure seems preferable and advantageous to the agony they're suffering from the pain they have agreed to assume presently.
I love how he makes this so analytic almost.
Down to earth.
Yeah, and he just tells you, listen, we're all we're pleasure accountants, basically.
Exactly. There's only a matter of deduction here, that they deduct the pain and suffering from the anticipated pleasure, and there remains some surplus. Well, of course, that's wishful thinking. Okay, because what we're doing is when we're making that calculation, we're assuming we will get some kind of a pleasure.
Which is the reason why we accept some suffering or lack of pleasure to begin with.
Exactly. So we're triggered basically on the hope that we're going to get more pleasure, hopefully, okay, if we suffer now and try our best and exert some effort to get something in the future. Now, there's a nice saying where I come from. They say the calculation I made at home never really matches the shopping. Okay, so I make a shopping list, but I go shopping, it never seems to like kind of match. I always seem to spend more than what I anticipated. So there's a saying like that where I come from, and this is how it is in life as well.
But this capacity, if we think about it, is what allows human beings to basically do everything that they do beyond animals. You know, we wouldn't invest in building a spaceship for years and going to space. We wouldn't invest in, in our personal life, we wouldn't invest in
anything,
studying
really.
in university for a few years to get a degree, to do something. But as Mutlu said, this is all on the hopes. It's built on this idea of a future pleasure. This is the capacity of a human being that an animal doesn't have, that can either help us develop towards greater things, like we just gave an example, but can also be our Achilles heel.
Absolutely.
Because, for an animal, everything's much simpler.
No.
It is so much simpler,
It's a dog's life, they say.
Just the lawn here is great. Just go there, bask in the sun. That's nice. You've got food over there, move from here to there, and it's done. Even when ants, seemingly, calculate from the summer into the winter, they aggregate food and so on, it's on instinct. There's no calculation, and it's a repetitive process. You can see it like in terms of cycles. We, on the other hand, have have an illusion and quite a broad and detailed illusion of free choice, because we have this idea of future pleasure. So we always stumble upon things that we think, well, maybe that will give me more pleasure, maybe this, maybe that, and then we are required to make a choice. We need some support towards a certain direction in order to design our hope about something and go for it. When people, for instance, go to study medicine or study how to practice law, anything that requires a couple of years, right? If they're not sure in the beginning, what happens is that, what do? You call someone, you talk to someone. You need some support that will convince you, that will add to your future hope, that will portray that future state as a great thing, so that you can agree to exert efforts, or in other words, deduct, some of the pleasure now to add some pleasure later. And that is really the capacity that is key to what we're going to understand next. So just keep that in mind, that the human can calculate present suffering versus future pleasure, whereas an animal, all it can do is look at present, future, present pain, and choose the immediate, instinctively go towards the immediate choice, which is more pleasure and less pain. And we do the same, but we can design the picture of pleasure that will appear to us a few steps forward, and even take into account the suffering or the effort that we have to make towards that state. That's a key quality that human beings have. We will have to understand, to kind of remember that and let it sink within us, in order to later understand where we do have choice and where we don't have free choice, and how do we then use that capacity later. So just keep that in mind.
Exactly. Actually, we're going to touch on that right now. So following what Asaf said, what we talked about, what our nature is, and what the generality of nature is, and what distinguishes us from animals, is the future, the calculation that we can make for the future, and our growing desire to receive more and more. So when does the critical point of freedom of choice really happen? Well, it happens when we start to live a split personality life. So here is our normal, animate, corporeal life. We're influenced here by all the factors I mentioned, and this is our daily life. Okay? So, and a person who lives normally in our world is influenced by the environment, and all our desires are actually from the things that we're influenced by our environment, isn't it? Everything that I want, I see on the media, or my parents taught me that these were good things. Even my career has been influenced by what I saw from around me, from my parents, or from what I saw from my friends or friends' parents, and so on. Everything I see, there's nothing that I can really bring and say, you know what, this is out of me. You know, this is really, I generated this from within me. Nothing. And the social scientists say we are a product of the environment.
You know, about that, that novelty that we all want to think that we have, and yet it's questionable whether we really have that. Einstein once said something like, what is creativity? It's how well you hide your sources. And basically...
Art is a very skilled plagiarism.
Yeah, basically, you know, it's funny, even if in university, you know, when you're doing a BA, then you have to just read stuff. When you're doing like MA, then you have to read stuff, and then, let's say, add a bit from your own. When you're doing a PhD, you have to take everything that's been said about a certain topic that you're investigating and put it together in a new way and call it your own. And so basically, all of us have novelty. We feel we have novelty. We feel we're new in who we are and what we do.
We all feel unique in some way.
We feel unique and singular, even, you know. But really, what is it that you create or make, if not some combination of everything you knew before?
So this is our daily life situation. We're a product of the environment, and depending in the culture that you grow up in, that's what happens. You know, if you grow up in Africa, if you grow up in the Middle East, Europe, America, Australia, whatever, you just become like them. And then you call yourself, I don't know, Australian, English, American, I don't know, Mexican, Kenyan, okay? And this is how we all are. So we all feel in that sense like we belong to that culture, or we belong to that, I don't know, environment that might be including in itself religion, art, culture, science, everything. We become basically a mishmash, a mosaic of all the particles that exist in that society and everything that we see from the media as well. So we're taking on everything, and we're kind of building inside of us our vision according to pain and pleasure as well, because the things we see around the world also cause inside of us pleasure and pain, and that makes us judge things, it makes us hate things, it makes us love things. We go through a lot of emotions, and we constantly become a new person actually throughout our lives by being exposed to everything that's going on in the environment. And hey presto, we grow up, and although the environment is still influencing us, what we do, we have a base character, a fundamental character and personality, and on top of that personality, we're constantly adding new things from the environment, and we're evolving and changing. The unique thing is when a person starts to ask the meaning of life, is he has a bit of a problem. The problem is called the dot in the heart. And this dot in the heart is asking, well, why? Okay, so it's looking at our life actually from a different perspective, from the outside, like an observer. Okay, so it's looking at our life here, and it's thinking, what is this all for? Why are we living? What's the meaning of my life? I'm like in this society, I live in this world, I'm going to end up dead, God knows when, it could be tomorrow, who knows, okay? Because with the amount of, shootings and car accidents and all kinds of accidents in life, natural disasters, you never know when you're going to end up dead all of a sudden. And you're thinking, well, why bother? Why would you? Because we're also feeling that we're not really having a fulfilling life. We're feeling that even though I might have the things that I want to live in a nice, comfortable way, I don't feel like I have a lot of pleasure from it. So this dot in the dot in the heart is asking us, why are we living? What's the purpose in life? What's the meaning in life? And that is the initial point where we begin to start scratching our nature. Because basically the question why is because we are unfulfilled. It's still from a desire to receive. The question why, or why me, as a lot of people say, right? Some bad things happen and people say, why me? Well, why not? Why do we feel we're different, that we don't deserve bad things when other people kind of do? So this dot in the heart is a bit of an irritation, but it's the beginning point about questioning our life and why we don't feel fulfilled. And when we study the wisdom of Kabbalah, we find ourselves in an ever more growing split. Basically what happens is the spectrum between my corporeal life and my spiritual life kind of becomes an ever more widening, and changing in perception and understanding of this dot in the heart, which started with why. Because on the one hand, I'm wondering about the meaning of life, and we're studying, because that's what you're here. On the other hand, this corporeal life is kind of draining and kind of straining. It's kind of, we're like in a split position here, and we're like in a dilemma. And the environment is influencing us so strongly, even though I might want to delve into spirituality, I might want to really grow in spirituality, I don't really have the ability because, well, 7.5 billion people are here, and right now we're about how many people? I don't know. Let's say 30 people here. Okay, 30 people compared to the 7.5 billion. So with the amount of huge influence of the environment on my corporeality and literally zilch on spirituality, I'm going to need some support. And that actually split between corporeal environment and a spiritual environment is actually what brings me to make a decision. Because if we look at it very pragmatically, we're a product of the environment, and now I'm in a split. Do I want to continue with my corporeal life, or do I want to continue in developing a spiritual life? So I'm like, okay, let's say I want to go for spirituality, but because I'm only developing with the input I get from society, my freedom of choice is not really what's going to happen whether I'm in a spiritual society or a corporeal society. It's really going to happen in what I choose, which environment I choose. Am I going to go this way, or am I going to go that way? Okay? And the Kabbalists are saying, well, this thin red line here is where your freedom of choice is, because the only thing that's allowing you to develop according to the desire in you is the environment. So if I wanted to be a football player, I'm not going to hang out with Einstein, am I? Because Einstein's going to seem to me like boring. I'm going to think, well, what's he talking about? Okay, I want to go out and play football. So if I want to be a scientist, obviously I'm not going to hang out with Ronaldo. I'm going to hang out with Einstein. Why? Because I want to be a scientist. It's just like in corporeality, when we make a decision to excel in something, we choose the best environment possible. Why do a lot of people want to go to the Ivy League universities? Because they understand there's great education there. And they understand that that environment will make something out of them, which will lead to success. Well, the Kabbalists are saying, well, that's exactly the whole point. The whole situation, the new situation I have right now is that I can actually choose not according to the many options of my corporeal life, but I can choose between worlds. And that's the whole idea, that I can choose to go beyond my corporeal perception of reality in a Kabbalistic environment, or I can choose to excel corporeally in a physical environment, depending on the different environments I choose in corporeality. So this is the thin red line where we have to exert all the time. That's the choice of environment, so that the environment can also influence me all the time in a positive way if I want to develop this little fella. Because this little fella really is a little fella. Okay, because let's say we're having a Kabbalah lesson right now. We're studying. Tomorrow when we go to work, we are completely sunk, immersed in what's going on in work. And we rarely think about our spiritual development, or we rarely think about the meaning of life. We just go through with the flow of life. So the environment becomes my freedom of choice. And it only can happen if I have a dot in the heart. Because the dot in the heart and my desire to receive are two complete opposite natures, just like we discussed in the beginning of the lesson. The Creator is an absolute desire to bestow and love and give. And that point in the heart is actually a part of the Creator in us. And our desire to receive self-fulfillment is our natural born desire, our natural nature. So this is the ever more growing split that we're going to be living as we advance in Kabbalah. And that's why freedom of choice is very, very important. Because in order to strengthen the dot in the heart, which is the initial point of my soul, the beginning point of my soul, with respect to my corporeal desires, I'm going to have to make it really stronger so it can overcome everything on a corporeal level and kind of leave corporeality under the control of this dot in the heart. And the only way that's going to happen is by giving it constant strengthening, nurturing, and the ability to understand and to feel new spiritual sensations by the influence of the environment. So I'm left actually with just one choice in life: the environment, depending on what I want to develop.
And this could be a good point to take questions, but I don't see we have any questions. I think our students were so engrossed in the kind of the flow of what we were talking about that they forgot they can ask questions.
Okay. Well,
This
I hope
happens
you're
to
not.
us in life as well.
I hope you haven't left the lesson.
Into the flow of life and just flow with the currents of life, and we forget that we can ask, wait a minute, what's going on here? Who is, what's going on? Where are we going? And this is a good reminder for you guys to ask questions in your life, in your day, and in your lessons, in your Kabbalah lessons as well.
If you don't have any questions
definitely.
regarding this, you can. But you've got something related to the previous lessons, ask that as well, because we'll link it to this. You'll see that everything in Kabbalah is actually
Absolutely.
linked to this topic of freedom of choice. Not just before attaining spirituality, but also after attaining spirituality. You'll see that you'll always need to put yourself in this little point in between your desire to receive and the Creator, and you're going to be in this dilemma about what to choose in order to attain what you need to attain. So we can relate any question you have also to this topic too, so don't be shy.
So let's make one link like that from things that we discussed within this lesson already. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, just shoot them into the chat box now. We'll be happy to take them. We spoke about this capacity that we have as human beings to design the picture of our future, the hoped for pleasure. And let's go back to Mutlu's recent diagram. if we can have a look at it, right? So we're seeing that this is kind of the choice that we're in, always in between the you know, the influence of the world and the influence of what influences our point in the heart. You know, this lesson, for instance, the Kabbalistic texts, other people with point in the heart. So let's roughly just say that the corporeal influence and the spiritual influence. And so what we learn from here is that we need to surround ourselves with a certain spiritual influence that will do what? That will design the greatest picture of pleasure about spirituality that we can design for ourselves. That's the whole thing. That's what it's all about. And our ability, our nature as humans is something we can't run away from. We will always move towards greater pleasure and reject pain. And you know what? That's fine. And even when you're discussing spirituality, you don't need to refrain from that or to try to twist it and change it. No, that's great. You just have to change what is the concept of pleasure and aim for the highest concept of pleasure at all times. And that is what we're doing when we work with a spiritual environment. We're constantly describing and envisioning and fantasizing, if you even want to call it that way, and making richer and greater that picture of the next spiritual state. And this is what allows us to overcome each time the effort we have to make or the entire corporeal picture that we see in order to prefer spirituality. And so an animal can't do that. An animal also doesn't have a point in the heart. And another point that we can see from this diagram, which is interesting, is that Mutlu put like 7.5 billion people on one side of the scales, and you know, let's say 100 people, 200 people, even let's say that we have the maximum that our server can take today, and you're just being quiet. But even that, you know, is, let's say 200 people, I think, or 3 or maybe 4, a few hundred people. So how do you compare this and that? This means that the people that you surround yourself for spiritual influence, they have to be as important and actually more important to you than all of the 7.5 billion people combined, because you're not going to compete with the corporeal influence on the basis of quantity. So you have to always appreciate and cherish and value the kind of environment that you want to be influenced by. And think about it, you know, it's just like when a person wants to be a scientist or wants to be an actor or wants to be a musician. This becomes if they really want to be experts, if they want to be artists, if they want to be, you know, highly, you know, professional at what they do and really make it their thing, then they have to value that thing and the people who engage in that and the profession itself and so forth as very, very dear to them. And they constantly have to work on that. So by now we've got a few questions.
Lovely.
So that's great. Yes, as I thought,
Bobby has a really good question there from.
But as I thought, our friends were so in the flow of the lesson that they forgot to ask questions. You forget you can ask. This is a funny thing that happens to every person in life. So Bobby's question is this. Yeah. Isn't this a paradox that needs bridging? We have to earn a living, live in a family. How do we choose our environment without isolating ourselves? It says in the book we're social creatures. how do we go from 7 billion to 30 without isolation? Great, great. I've actually just started touching upon that. That's great.
That's wonderful. And the beautiful thing about Kabbalah is we don't go off to the mountaintop or to some village, isolate ourselves and say, well, we're going to get spiritual and forget the rest of the planet. Okay, we don't do that. It's very good. During the day, okay, let's take a Kabbalah student, right? A student of Bnei Baruch. Okay, let's say this is a student of Bnei Baruch. Student at BB. Okay, so he has a daily life and a daily routine. So first of all of us have families. We all have kids, families. Okay, so we all have family. And family means responsibility. So we, take on that. So what do we have to do? We need to work to look after our family and to maintain our day-to-day life, don't we? So, we all go to work. By the way, we don't get paid for teaching, okay? All of the activities that we're doing here at Bnei Baruch as students of Kabbalah are on a voluntary basis, all right? So I go to work, I have a family, but on top of that, I also discover that I have quite a bit of free time in life. Because at the end of the day, let's say I'm sleeping, let's say 6 to 8 hours, okay? I'm working, let's say 8 to 10 hours, including traffic, okay? So at the end of the day, I've got like 18 hours, okay? And I've got like 2 hours, let's say, meals, food, family time, talking or whatever. Let's say 3, okay?
1.5 hour these days people put into just staring at their
television
at
or
their
mobile,
screen.
their mobile phone.
Their mobile phone.
So all of that.
So you somehow have to factor that in.
Exactly. All of that is like 21 hours. Okay? So I've got left from 24 hours another 3 hours. Now these are what I can do. Look at your day-to-day life. You come home, you eat, you're with the family, you spend some time with them, and the rest of the evening you're probably watching TV or reading a book or whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter. But you've got time where you can say, you know what, I can now do something extra. Right? We have hobbies, all of us have hobbies. Sometimes we go to the gym and we do workouts or whatever. I also go to the gym. I do go to the gym, believe it or not. Okay, believe it or not. Okay, I'm not a radical gym man, but we do sports, keep healthy. On the weekend, we spend time with the family as well, all right? But on top of that, I discover, if I look at my life, I discover that, I do have a few hours during the day where I can do whatever I want. Those are the hours that are important, actually. Because those are the hours where you're actually free to choose. The rest of the time, you're not free to choose because our body needs to eat, sleep, needs to spend time working. We need to go to work, right? But I look at my life and make a calculation. Well, where do I have free time? Because when I have free time, I have free choice. All right? That's also this is why Bobby's question was really, really nice. So all you have to do is make a calculation. Where's my free time? And where do I want to spend that free time? Because you guys could have been doing all kinds of things. Today is Thursday night. You could have been out at the local bar having a drink. You could have been out at a restaurant. You could be watching football or baseball or a
just,
movie.
Flipping through YouTube aimlessly.
Exactly.
As a lot of people tend to do these days.
Exactly. Looking at your Facebook and
you
scrolling
just
down.
Scroll. Figuring out where will it take you. Not even asking, just flowing with the news feed, forgetting that you can ask questions. And that's why you have us. That's why you come here to contemplate on the meaning of it all and see where it takes you. And so this is one level of sort of answer to your questions, Bobby. And let's give it another level. So again, just to kind of recap, you don't need to go live in a cave and isolate yourself from the rest of reality and have storage of food and just be isolated with some Kabbalah texts, and that is what will take you to spirituality. Even if you did that, it's not gonna do anything good. You have to be part of the world. We're integrated with the fabric of society, and through that fabric of society, the corporeal society as well, we are integrated into the plan of nature. And our spiritual growth has to do with that integration into the social fabric as well. It's intertwined. And so there is no need to isolate yourself. But that's on the outside. On the inside, a person who has something important to them, like their loved one, let's say, they think about them constantly. And they can be doing all this stuff they need to do, whether they're working, whether they're eating, whether they're, they're commuting. They spend time with their physical body in their physical world, doing all kinds of things like Mutlu described. But if something is so important to them, sometimes even when they sleep, they think about it, right? So what does this tell us? It tells us that the kind of strengthening of that influence or of the values that you want to be influenced by, the environment is really about values. It's not a physical thing, right? When you want to be a musician, you want to be, you're thinking about like the how important it is to be like this musician or that musician, or how much you can, recreate something new from what you know, and you're always immersed in that even when you do other things, if you're given birth to a new creation and so forth. And in spirituality, there's a similar thing that's going on, because you have to, while you are spending time in the world, in the different environments that you find yourselves in externally, you have to sort of see how you take it all in and do what we call in Kabbalah inner work, which means to see where is your free choice in relating everything that you're going through to your spiritual process, to your inner journey, to the development of the point in the heart. And that's where you'll find you have a choice, not just in those moments where you don't do anything else with your body, but even when you do other things with your body, but you're suddenly reminded of your point in the heart, and you just make a certain inner choice to give it importance. To, hey, I was just reminded that there's a process and a purpose beyond just what I'm doing right now in my life, and that's important to me. And so the way to think about the influence of the environment in Kabbalah, beyond a certain framework, just like you decide that you're coming to this lesson twice a week to keep you progressing and studying Kabbalah and understanding what it is and so forth, beyond that framework, which can also vary depending on your circumstance. You'll finish this course, we have another course, and maybe you'll find some time to read on your own. Maybe the other options will be open to you as you advance. But the way to think about the influence of the environment is, how do I make that environment more important all the time? How do I make the concept of spiritual progress more and more important? That is really what it is. How do I value the point in the heart as my dearest desire? And so in that respect, you need to always tend towards the spiritual influence, but not to lock yourself up in a cave and isolate yourself from the external world. So, more questions we do have. Paul from the UK asked, can the dot in the heart fade away without the environment?
Absolutely, and we've seen many examples of that. It can. If the environment doesn't make me strong, if I don't enter an environment where I'm kind of influenced by it, it'll just fade away. We've seen many examples. I've seen thousands of people come and go. So yeah, happens.
which means what? Which means that you have a free choice. So from the moment you have a point in the heart, you should think, you know, do you want to develop it and really feel what it needs, what it craves? If so, surround it with an environment that will encourage it to grow. Melanie from Tucson says she has a question, maybe not related to the lesson. Let's give it a shot. Are we supposed to try to understand thoughts or ideas by putting them or interpret them into tree of life paths and sfirot? I heard this would increase our understanding.
I think the best way to look at life, Melanie, is according to what I see. And because we're reading Kabbalistic sources, and really sometimes when they're talking about the Sefirot and all this, it's very interesting. And they're actually talking about spiritual concepts which we should be feeling inside our soul. Okay? But however, right now we don't have that soul. We don't have that sensory organ. A lot of people say, oh, we have a soul, but we don't. If we had that sensory organ called a soul, we would be feeling the Creator right now. We would be having a dialogue right now in my corporeal perception. I'm having a dialogue with Asaf, right? Because my perception of reality in these five senses tell me Asaf is here. I can see him, feel him, touch him, can literally smell him, okay? And he's here. So I have something to talk about. So with things that are currently out of my sensory organs and perception, there's no need to get confused. And a lot of people get confused and start living life on the assumption that things are like that, when in fact they're not living it like that. And that's a very, very bad error. So what we need to do in Kabbalah, we need to be very pragmatic. We need to say, okay, this is how I perceive reality. I understand I'm questioning my life, and I understand there are some texts that are shedding some light upon my situation. So let's study and let's see what we can get out of them. However, the things that we need to get out of them right now with these articles that we're studying is related to the situation that I'm currently in. So I don't want to be going into some kind of an imaginary world where I don't see what they're talking about and think as if I do, because that'll just take us off the wrong track. This is why there are so many spiritual teachings that, sometimes you read about things that are just like bewildering, because there's no way it could be like that, but in that person's imagination, that's like in this la-la land. So very, very important for us to stay solid on our two legs. Okay? Our aspiration is always to a higher level of perception, but we're solid on two legs right here. Yeah.
What we do need to keep, where you do have kind of, the freedom to go wild without going wrong in Kabbalah is not the intellectual part, because like Mutlu said, you're trying to intellectualize things that you haven't yet felt. It's kind of interesting that you can hear me, but you can't see me. It'll be nice. There we go. Yes. Wow. We are now both in the frame.
The tech guys are testing the perception of
exactly,
reality.
We spoke about perception of reality, and this is what we see. Where were we? Another important concept to take into account in relation to Melanie's question is where you can go wild without going wrong, and that is desire. Kids, a child that wants to be a pilot. They play as if they're pilots, and they play with their friends, and they create an entire scenery, imaginary scenery, that they're flying a plane. And the thing about the difference between us and the children as adults is that, we want to intellectualize it. We want to understand it before we feel it. Children when they play that game, it's not like they actually, that they're trying to understand and interpret what it means to be a pilot. They're working on their desire. They're working on their emotional aspiration for being a pilot. And so this is where you can go wild. Just when you have an environment like right now, what we need to do constantly is to inspire each other about how great that next state of spiritual attainment is. That's basically it. It's such a simple thing. It's just like what children do. And what that does, if we allow ourselves to be influenced by that environment, and we, it's like when, think about people who want to be aspiring filmmakers, okay? So aspiring filmmakers, you see them getting excited about this film or that film, and this videography or that technique and this story and that story. And what they're really doing is they're cultivating their desire, their passion for what they want to be. And in that respect, you can never go wrong. Just focus on how important and great and amazing adhesion with the Creator really is. And when you go into the Kabbalistic texts, when you go into a lesson like this, when you go into all kinds of interactions with other students, and we will learn how to practically do that work later on. This is now just the basics. But the more you have these opportunities, the mindset you're coming with is, how do I just inspire myself and inspire the others to inspire myself again in this feedback loop and grow my desire for spirituality. That's what we need to focus on. It's amazing. It takes a while, but after a while in Kabbalah, we just realize that it's not about the intellectual, knowledge that we hear. That's kind of a side effect. Yeah, you will become a lot smarter as a result of studying Kabbalah, in the sense that your perception will be wider, deeper. You see deeper into the motivations of the human being and therefore the whole of society. The news will even look different. But all of that really is not the purpose to make your mind brighter. The purpose of studying Kabbalah is to grow your point in the heart from a little desire into an accomplished vessel for the reception of the light, what we refer to as a soul. And a soul is something very specific and very concrete and not vague and theoretical in the wisdom of Kabbalah. A soul simply means when your original will to receive and now also have a developed point in the heart that develops into something called intention, an intention to bestow that works on top of that will to receive, or at least a minimal layer of the will to receive, then you already have a working soul, where your will to receive can work with an intention to bestow to some extent. That's also called crossing the barrier, a machsom, we call it in Hebrew. That barrier, that threshold that we need to raise our sensitivity above in order to begin to feel our connection with the Creator, or in other words, our connection with the quality of bestowal, or in other words, spirituality, or in other words, the connection between all the elements of nature, and of course, between us, points in the hearts, and all of humanity. And so I was actually also answering Brian from Indiana, who says we learn different concepts at the lessons. At what point can we start to apply it into what we've learned into a perceived experience? So that is kind of the trajectory of how it happens. But it'll take a few more lessons until you get more and more opportunities for seeing how to work with the environment. But this lesson really is the beginning of it all. This is where you understand that in order to develop your point in the heart, you need an environment, and you'll begin to see from now on, how do I work with the environment? Because that's where it all is. That's where the work is. Internally, externally, it's about shaping your environment to shape your point in the heart. That's what it is. Do we have any video clips or
We do,
all kinds
actually.
of unexpected surprises?
We can always bet on an unexpected surprise from the creator himself. But we do have an extra clip. Let's have our second clip right now.
The Asch Experiment is one of psychology's oldest and most popular pieces of research. A volunteer
We think that we're free people, standing strong in this world with both feet on the ground. We're confident, we can do everything, we have the knowledge, we feel, we operate the whole world. Each one of us is great, understanding, sensing, independent. But bit by bit, a different picture is revealed to us. That all in all of our actions are being operated from above. I don't feel these strings that are constantly operating me. I turn, I check things out, there's a great big world ahead of me. I want to conquer it, turn it. But I don't remember, and I don't understand, and I don't feel that I'm being operated and activated from above. If on every step that I take, there is a thread from above tied to my mind and heart, where am I then? So Kabbalah explains to us that you don't exist in this whole operating system. You're being operated. But you have freedom in only one thing, to agree with this activation, to study this operation, to want to perform the very same actions that are performed upon you from above, and not to stand in the way of the upper providence. The moment you do what they tell you to, you succeed. Why? Because you will go along with the upper wisdom. With the upper wisdom, not with your own reason. And this is your freedom, and this is the best possible secure state for you to advance in life and succeed in everything corresponding to the upper wisdom. And if so, you will ascend up to the upper wisdom in degrees and connect to the one operating you, and then you shall be great and tall, and not the poor little thing not knowing how will life end.
There we go, kind of sums it up. Now, we do have a bit more to read, but I did see that the clip already had some of the parts that we did want to go over. So I'm happy to go. We got 9 minutes.
Let's just introduce it. We can show the previous clip that we wanted to show, but just to introduce it. So we talked a lot about the influence of the environment. It's important to understand this is something that actually Bar Sulam explains this beautifully in the article, and like what Mutlu explained at some point in this lesson, social sciences have a clear picture. The last pretty much 70 years of social psychology have shown that we are so malleable by the influence of the environment, that it really shapes our perception and our actions and our values to the point of, from the littlest things that we decide to do in life, like how we eat and how we talk and how we speak and how we dress and so forth, to bigger actions like and addictions that people have, whether they get divorced, they get married. Everything apparently from a social science perspective happens by the influence of the groups that we're in. And we can show you a famous reenactment of a famous experiment that shows this on the micro level, on how a group of people, even 3 or 4 people, can influence an individual in terms of things that we think are obvious, and we can see how much the environment shapes us. And so let's watch that video clip. It's 2 minutes. Let's watch that and come back.
The Asch Experiment is one of psychology's oldest and most popular pieces of research. A volunteer is told that he's taking part in a visual perception test. What he doesn't know is that the other participants are actors, and he's the only person taking part in the real test, which is actually about group conformity.
Please begin. The experiment you will be taking part in today involves the perception of line length. Your task will be simply to look at the line here on the left and indicate which of the 3 lines on the right is equal to it in length. So, for example, if you...
The actors have been told to match the wrong lines. The volunteer will be monitored to see if he gives the correct answer or if he goes along with the opinion of the group and gives the wrong answer. In the first test, the correct answer is 2.
1. 1. 1. It's 2.
1. Once again, the correct answer is 2.
3. 3. 3. 3.
3.
The Asch conformity experiment has been repeated many times. It's been suggested that, first, the distortion happens at the level of action. The subject believes the others are wrong, yet goes along with them anyway. Then it happens at the level of judgment. The subject begins to think, maybe they're seeing something I'm not seeing. And then it happens at the level of perception, which means that the subject's actual perception of what's right or wrong is distorted by the majority. Now, when you link these conclusions to what's happening in the world today, you have to ask, in what way have we been using the influence of society, which is probably the most powerful force in human psychology?
All right, so this is, this is like a famous, very known and basic fundamental experiment in social psychology. This is 1951, almost 70 years ago, and since then social science has only proven more and more and more and more aspects of our life and experience are so designed and shaped by the environment, we're just unaware of that. That's the illusion, the illusory perception that is created. We're not going to go into the whole science of it, but you can research it yourself if it's interesting to you. Bara Sulam, however, summarizes this beautifully in the article "The Freedom." You have it on page 376, the end of that page. Let's maybe I'll read it quickly. We can also maybe find the excerpt and put it on the screen. Starts with the word moreover. So I'll start reading, and in the meantime, if our text, yeah, there we go. Moreover, even determining the type of pleasure and benefit are entirely out of one's own free choice, but follow the will of others as they want and not he. For example, I sit, I dress, I speak, and I eat, and I do all these things not because I want to sit that way or talk that way or dress that way or eat that way. And this is Baruch Salam writing for us almost maybe 7 years ago he's writing this. But because others want me to sit, dress, talk, and eat that way. It all follows the desire and fancy of society and not my own free will. And so the point is that we will always be influenced by the environment, and yet with the point in the heart, in between all our other corporeal desires and the point in the heart, we can only make a choice of what environment to strengthen, what influence of an environment to strengthen over ourselves. That is the that space, that latitude where we have choice. Now, obviously, you have a bunch of more unsolved issues and things here that you can relate to the concepts that we studied today, and we can talk more about it, and we will in the next lesson.
This lesson has a part 2 as well. I wouldn't miss it.
I would come, however, with questions. This will be great for the second lesson because now that we have sort of the basis of how Baruch Salam, how Kabbalah explains free choice, at least in terms of like the main blocks, pleasure and pain, the our nature and how it works, and the social influence mechanism, and that the point in the, between the point in the heart and that social influence mechanism and our capacity for designing our future hope for pleasure, we can then combine these elements in a way that allows us to choose our fate to an extent. Now, go wild with your questions about it. Try to go into the article, go into Kabbalah for the Student. If you don't have the book, really it's a great opportunity to just have the book. You should, because connecting with the Kabbalistic text is so important for your spiritual development. If you still don't have a hard copy, then use the PDF that we're providing with excerpts from this article. Read through the whole thing that you have there, and come with questions to the next lesson, because we hope to base much of that lesson on your questions. I think that's pretty much
That's pretty much it.
a summary of our lesson.
That's right.
That puts the cap on it. So, do we have any announcements? Maybe the usual things?
The usual things, I guess. Your next lesson will be on Sunday evening, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
It will. That is November 20. You should also note that there's not going to be a lesson next Thursday because holidays. There's a holiday in the U.S., and so we will see you afterwards, a week afterwards.
So Sunday as usual, but next Thursday, due to Thanksgiving,
right,
there won't be a lesson.
And so please take any unanswered questions in the meantime to the forum. If you have questions about this topic, collect them, save them for the next lesson, read through the material. If you have any, as usual, technicalities or general things you want help with, just contact ec@kabbalah.info. And that's it. That's it.
So we'll see you guys next time.
Yes, in the meantime, choose a good environment.
All the best.
Bye-bye.